Perfect. And I will go ahead and hop in and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mars Rivas. I am going to be offering up the presentation about the application workshop today. And our goal for today is to just get you, familiar with the application process, kind of have an idea of what things to expect when you're drafting up your application. And then if you see me looking off to the left, that is just because I'm trying to reflect on my notes or the presentation. So just in case it looks a little off, that's why. And then another heads up is that we are recording the session. So that began as soon as we let everybody in. And so just so you're aware that we make you, aware of what's going on. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you again for joining us. Happy Monday. We're going to go ahead and cover some of the materials for your MEng application. Perfect. So important dates to remember. Probably your most important one is going to be your January 7th deadline. So that's coming. Even though we're in November, those deadlines do approach fast. So I do encourage folks to start getting your materials drafted. If you haven't started your application already, now is a good time to do so that you can make sure that you've got all of your elements by the time it's ready to go. And so this is going to be the application cycle for fall 2026. And this is for the Master of Engineering with the Fung Institute. All right, so some of our admissions requirements, so things that you are going to need, first and foremost is going to be your department and your concentration selection. So it's really important that you also understand the distinction between the Master of Science and the Master of Engineering. And the reason that I say that is because you're only allowed to submit one graduate application per cycle. And so it's really important that you are clear on your department of choice and your concentration of choice. Once you formally lock those things in, you cannot change them. And so it's going to be really important that you are clear on what you want to assign to your application because we're not allowed to make changes afterwards. And then if in the event that you're admitted into the program, you're not allowed to switch because your materials were reviewed on the basis of the application or the program that you submitted to. And so what we're also going to need is your academic history. You're allowed to submit unofficial transcripts. We just need to ensure that all of those things are reflected with your cumulative GPA, that we can actually see like the stamp, the logo, and then those things will be totally fine once they're uploaded. Once if you're admitted into the program, at that point we will require official transcripts. And then if you're an international student, if you have had your like transcripts evaluated before, you're welcome to submit a copy of the old ones. If your transcripts are also in English, same thing, you can upload all of those materials. And then if in the event that we need something verified or hardline copied, the institute will communicate with you, the university will communicate with you, and then we will ask for the official documents at that time. Test scores. So the only program that actually requires the GRE is going to be the IEOR program. So if any of you are submitting to the Industrial Engineering and Operations Research Program, that's the only one that requires the GRE. If you attach it and you submit it for any of the other programs, it simply won't be considered because we ensure that it's fair across the board. So even if you include it, we're not going to review it because it's not required. And then the TOEFL and the IELTS. I'm so sorry. I always get that one stumbled. That one is, those are required if you graduated from an institution internationally, but the primary language was not English. So if you're an international student, if you graduated from an institution in another country, at that point, we would require the TOEFL if it was not instructed in English. And then your essays and your statement of purpose. So those are going to be, you're going to have your personal history statement and your statement of purpose, which are the two that we require. So with the statement of purpose, this one is specific to sort of your reasons why. Anything that is going to outline your goals, the ways in which you connect to the institution, anything that aligns with UC Berkeley, funds in particular, those are all going to be the things that are outlined within the statement of purpose. With your personal history statement, that one is going to be sort of your background. So we do require the two. And then we also require 2 to 3 letters of recommendation. And then depending on the program, if it requires 3, then obviously you have to submit all 3. If it only requires 2, when you get to that third one, you'll be able to input your information so that you can bypass it and lock in your application. And then the other thing that we require is either your resume or your CV. And so we'll want to make sure that you have multiple sets of eyes on those. So this is just the overall review of what the requirements are. All right. And so how to apply? How many of you at this point have already created your grad app? You're welcome to use the little icon. If your camera's on, you're welcome to raise your hand. How many of you have started it yet? Okay, cool. That's great. Perfect. And then we keep those numbers like obviously updated in real time. So, if you feel ready and prepared to start your stuff after this presentation, then great. We'll be able to kind of see and track your progress along as well. Um, so as you're creating your application in the portal, you want to make sure that you are opting for your graduate application and the appropriate year. And so that's going to be for the 2026 and the 2027 cycle. And then you'll want to be sure that you actually select the Master of Engineering. Master of Engineering is the one-year fast track program. So just make sure you select the right one. And just a reiteration that you can only apply to one program per application cycle. So anything within the portal that has an asterisk on it means that it's required. So if that requires the submission, then we have to have that material in there, that data in there. So just go ahead and be sure to input anything that it's asking of you. It won't technically allow you to move forward or like formally submit the application unless those things are entered. But you can save your progress throughout the duration of your application cycle. Perfect. And so once you get into the actual application and you're looking at the intended program of study, here is where you're actually going to select on the drop menu Fall 2026. And then here is where you're going to opt for your program choice. And so if that is Bio-E, if that's bioengineering, then that is what you're going to opt for. And so that one's pretty straightforward. Just make sure you select the right one. All right. And then once we get into your next selection, you're going to be able to outline your area of interest. This is where you put the concentration. So it's really important that you select the number one choice, the one that you want. Ensure you put that in there so that you can be reviewed for the right program. So all of these things are really important. I know that they seem so simple and so straightforward, but so many times applicants rule themselves out of the search because they have opted for the incorrect program and there's no way to change it. So your academic history, this is going to include any of the institutions where you received undergraduate credit. So if you received college credit, maybe you attended a community college for your first couple of years, and then you transferred into your four-year institution. In that case, we would require both unofficial documents for both the community college and the institute that you attained your bachelor's degree from. And so anything that just has to include like your official name, it has to have the institution name, it needs to have all of the coursework that you took, grades included, and then at the very end, if it's applicable to you, you'll want to ensure that you have the degree conferral on there. And typically that just takes a couple of weeks from the time like post graduation. And so if you're waiting for something, that's also totally okay. You're welcome to submit those materials. And then again, like if you're admitted into the program, then we would request the official documents at that time that show proof of your degree. For international students, so when we are asking for your documents, you want to be sure that you upload a scanned copy of either the transcript or the degree certificate, and then any kind of translations that the institution has that was post high school. So again, all of your undergraduate material. If you graduated and your transcript for some reason does not show that your degree is conferred, totally okay. You're welcome to scan a copy of your degree or the certificate and include that in that section. And then there's typically on the back of any transcript, there should be a grading scale. And so if you even have, if you have an original, it should have exactly what you're looking for if in the event that you need to translate your documents. And so the grading scale should definitely be on there. And then if, again, like your academic records are from another country where the language is not either in English or in Spanish, then we'll definitely need to see translated documents so that we can ensure that your materials and your minimum requirements are met. And so you'll have the option to be able to do that through the American Translators Association or the Ministry of Education. And then we'll want to make sure that you upload the original language and the English translation as well. And so Again, we don't require the official documents, so you don't have to actually have like the West translated documents right in this moment. That's only if in the event that you're admitted into the program. Perfect. And then we do get a lot of questions about the GPA and sort of what you're supposed to be inputting and where. Typically, this is going to be straightforward. So for your cumulative undergraduate GPA, that should be at the end of all of your transcripts. You'll want to go ahead and enter that here. And then you can also account for your advanced GPA. So anything that was completed after your second year. And then you also, if it shows a breakdown, not every transcript does this, not every institution offers it. If for some reason it does show like the GPA for the major field of study, great. Then okay, go ahead and include that. If it doesn't, don't worry about that. One of the things that I do tell the applicants, though, is for the GPA for the courses in the major field of study, I think that this can be really helpful when you're trying to outline maybe like a non-traditional background. So like, let's say that you struggled in your first or second year of your undergraduate experience, and maybe that kind of hit your GPA really hard. But then once you kind of went past that, maybe you did really well in like your third and fourth year. And typically those are the years where you're taking all of your courses that are specific to your major. This is a good area to be able to build on something if you're one of those students, or if that is something kind of similar to your background. This would allow you to sort of like, maybe you're really strong inside of that major, and maybe your major GPA is like a 3.85 as opposed to maybe like the 3.2 that's reflected on the overall. So I think that it can just be helpful to sort of building out your case. So if it's included on there, great. If it's not, I would encourage you to go the extra mile to maybe calculate your GPA for those last 2 years so that you can include it there. And then if your intended field of study was not your major for your undergraduate degree, then you're welcome to also put that here. And then if you attended graduate school, if you attended like a different program, even if it was partial, even if you didn't complete it, go ahead and put that information here as well. And then anything that's other scale. So let's say that your GPA is translated on maybe a 5.0 scale. This is where you're going to input that information. So if for some reason you're having trouble like translating the documents, or you are having trouble calculating what that means for a 4.0 GPA, simply input your GPA here, and then we'll go from there. And then you can upload any of the calculation documents if your program requires it. If your program does not require it, you don't have to use that part. Again, so test scores, I'll reiterate, the only ones that we require the GRE for is industrial engineering and operations research. The code is the same through ETS, so that's going to be your 4833. So just as long as you have your scores in before the deadline, everything should be good and accounted for. Again, if you apply to a program that does not require the GRE, but you input your GRE scores, we're simply not going to review them to make that fair across the board. And then the TOEFL and the IELTS is going to be, again, if you graduated from an international institution, if you're an international student, but the primary language for your institution was not English, that's when we would require that. It's also not uncommon for folks to register for their exams using a different email. And so a lot of times we get a lot of inquiries of like, hey, I know I took the exam, I know I sent in my scores, but it's still not reflected in my application. Totally okay. Just send an email to the Fung inbox. And what we'll do is we'll go through and see if we can find any of the information, see if maybe the scores were entered in under a different email address. Usually I would say 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. And then we're able to simply merge the documents for you. So if that happens, like I said, just send us an email into the inbox and we'll follow up with you. And then folks are always asking if they're exempt from the exam. These would be the criteria that would allow you to be exempt from the TOEFL or the IELTS. So if you have a degree that's recognized from an institute where the country is the official language is taught in English, then then you're exempt. If you've completed like an advanced degree, so let's say that you maybe did your bachelor's in another country, but you completed your master's in the US, okay, is totally fine. I've also had students that have completed maybe their first couple of years internationally, but then they completed their undergrad within the States. That also allows you to be exempt because you have attained your degree from a US institution. and then have completed at least 1 year of full-time academic coursework within the US with grades of B or better. And so again, if that's translated on your transcript, if that's reflected on your US institution transcripts as well, then you're exempt from that. All right. And so we'll jump over to the essays for now, and then we'll kind of cover what that means for each one. So I know we touched a little bit on the statement of purpose at the beginning. Both of your statements are going to require that you have a maximum of 1,000 words, or as close as possible to that. And so again, with the statement of purpose, this is really going to be about your reasoning why. So really connecting your career goals, your professional aspirations, anything that links you to UC Berkeley, and in particular FUNG, which is about applying your technical skills and gaining those leadership skills. All of those things are going to be good things to really build your statement of purpose in and around. So I would say making the connection to your long-term goals and how it aligns. With your personal history statement, it's going to be a little different. That's going to be outlining sort of your background, your individual experience, maybe some of the things that you have overcome, something that makes you very unique and individual, and has sort of brought you to this point. So sort of outlining your background and letting us know what you as an individual has had to offer, has overcome. All of those things really give us a clearer picture of who you are. I think that's probably one of the most common questions we get, especially at like graduate fairs and things like that. Folks always want to know, like, what is it that's going to get me to stand out? And I feel like it's the statements are a huge component. It's really going to be the thing that allows you to outline your goals and make the connection. It's really going to allow you to tell your story and paint that for us so that we see why you're a good candidate. I do not recommend like copying and pasting statements just to fill the requirement because they are two different statements that we ask for. Um, I have seen students sort of copy and paste other statements from other institutions and just sort of plug in the name and swap it out so they can cover many institutions. But I think that's a surefire way to make it less personal. I think it really shows when folks have done their research and they're being very intentional about the connections that they're making when drafting up these statements. And I feel like a review committee can always tell. And then definitely now that we're in the era of AI and folks have access to things like, Chat GPT, I think it's also really important for folks to really stick to that, making it as personal as possible. We don't want you to sound like a computer. We're trying to figure out how you stand out. And so our committee can also gather those things. So we just encourage you to also have many sets of eyes on your statements, which is one of the reasons why I encourage folks to start drafting your materials now. Because if you have recommenders, which we're going to get into next, they're probably going to want to look at these materials so that they have an idea of what they're writing their recommendation letters for. So that'll give me a good transition into the next couple of slides. So with the statement of purpose, again, outlining your background experiences, your alignment, your passion to the engineering field, like what exactly you plan on doing with that, highlighting your skills. So if there's anything that we can't see that's on the application, especially in those boxes, you always have the opportunity to input something. So we're going to be able to see that on paper. So when drafting up a statement, I think a lot of times it's important to put the things on paper that we can't see reflected inside of the application already. I don't encourage folks to don't waste space talking about your GPA when it's already reflected that it's strong. I would focus on other things like your technical skills or what things you're trying to gain from this program. Um, and then making the specific argument for why specifically this time frame, why specifically UC Berkeley, and then why that particular area of focus and concentration. And so again, don't just list off things that are on your resume. Again, those are things that we can gather. That's a material that you've uploaded. So really using this as an opportunity to help yourself stand out. And then personal history, again, just a lot of this, and it also doesn't have to be specific to a barrier that you have overcome. Maybe that has not been your experience, but you can share something different, maybe something that has allowed you a different viewpoint, a different lens from an experience that you came in with. And so this particular part is again like outlining some of the things that you've had to personally endure, personally go through, and we want to understand how you've overcome those things. There are also ways to outline sort of your academic service to advance equitable access to higher education for whether that be women, racial minorities, and individuals from other groups that are historically marginalized or historically underrepresented. You can make those connections between the research that you've been doing, any kind of populations that you've served, any missions that align with you. I think all of those things are ways to outline like who you are as an individual and what you have to offer as an individual. And so definitely like reflect on those things. I would say outline those experiences, and be clear about the things that have brought you up to this point. Um, this is also, I feel like personal history statement is also a good statement if you are trying to outline, like maybe again, like maybe you had a hard couple of first years in your undergrad and you want to use this as an opportunity to sort of explain how you've advanced and how you've grown over the years, how that makes you a better student. I think these are also helpful opportunities for you to build on that. And so if that is some of your experience, if you're a first generation student, maybe you're a career changer, I think all of those things really tell a story and paint a picture of how you've ended up here. So if that helps give any context, we're going to open up the floor at the end for questions. And so if anything comes up about any of the statements, we'll take those then, and then try to get those clear for you. All right, so tips on both essays. I would just say again, like have many sets of eyes on those things. If you have a few trusted people that you would like to review them, great. I also think that it's important to have your recommenders review them as well. Um, and then we kind of touched on that, stories that are like specific to you. This is where I feel like not like don't depend on like chat gpt and ai, because they're not going to know what experiences are specific to you and we'll be able to gather that. And then definitely proofread. I'm a big component too of like when I say many sets of eyes, the reason that I say many sets of eyes is also because many people are good at different things. Somebody might be better at organization and structure, and then you may have another reviewer that's better at like punctuation, grammar, things along those lines. So I feel like when you have the many sets of eyes, sometimes having all of those things can actually help you pinpoint exactly what you're trying to say. It can help you remove things that are redundant, things that you've repeated, and really make your statement hard hitting, but it can also help them draft something really strong for you in the background. So I feel like it's one of the reasons why I always like push to send it to your recommenders and trusted friends. I know that many of y'all, if y'all are pursuing grad school, you probably have a community of people in your network that are pursuing the same thing. And so it may be helpful to sort of support each other in that process. Letters of recommendation. So again, 2 letters are required for the MEng program. The only program that requires 3 is EECS. And so that's the Electrical Engineering and Computer Science program. So again, if you are applying to the other ones, you only have to submit 2. When it asks for the third recommendation letter, you'll just be able to bypass that by entering your own information, and then going past that from there. And so what happens is once you actually input your recommenders. Oh, go ahead, Janine.
Yes, so fresh off the presses, and sorry for being late. It used to be that all of our recommendations were defaulted to 3, so you would have to put like a fake third one, like my name and then nothing. But now graduate division allowed it so that it's 2 set, but with the option of a third. So no need to do like that third fake C's application.
Okay, cool. Awesome.
Just do 2 and then a third one if you have a third one.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's so helpful. Perfect. So never mind. The 2 will automatically bypass for you. And then if you have the third one for EECS, then definitely submit that one so we can ensure that your application is complete. And so what happens is once you input your recommenders info, so like their email address, their contact information, they're automatically going to get a notification that will allow them to input all of the information. And so you can definitely lock in your application well before they've submitted, but they do need to submit their letter of recommendation by the deadline. So it is really important that you draft the application now, you start reaching out to them now, because I know some of them are, they're busy. I know some of y'all are asking your supervisors or instructors. And I know that as we get closer to crunch time, especially with the end of a semester coming up, you also want to account for the fact that they may be needing to submit grades and all of that great stuff. So I would highly encourage y'all to start reaching out now. And then at the very end, so once you actually input your information for those recommenders, there's going to be a section that asks you if you are open to waiving your right to review the recommendation letter. We always encourage folks to go ahead and do this. So go ahead and click that. Go ahead and waive your right. And we ask that as a best practice. We feel like that's fair across the board. We definitely want to ensure that our recommenders are submitting, you know, their honest feedback. And so we ask in terms of best practice equity and being fair across the board that folks opt for this. It's also going to allow your application to be submitted quicker. If you're waiting for it, then it's gonna allow time because you're gonna have to review it and all these things are gonna happen. So I would recommend waiving that. And then double checking, make sure all of the email information, contact information is correct. It's not uncommon for maybe the email to get bounced back. So we want to make sure the contact information is there. And also reminding them to check their spam. Sometimes the requests do go there. Perfect. And then ask recommenders if they have time to write you something strong. Folks they always ask, like, does it matter, who? Yes and no. Yes, we have those asks for the academic letters of rec. Yes, we have those asks for the supervisor letters of rec. But we really, really want somebody who's going to write something substantial for you, something that can really speak to who you are, something that gives us an idea of the fact that they actually know you. And so I would definitely recommend that you ask somebody who is either academically connected to you or has professionally evaluated you. And then we also ask for somebody who has experience writing letters with other students. Sometimes this is helpful just because they've done it before. Um, and then definitely give them clear deadlines. So if you know that the deadline is January 7th, make sure you convey all of that information to them when you ask so that they're aware of their timeline too. And it's okay to follow up with reminders. You're not going to be a bother to any of them. It's just a gentle, like tap, gentle nudge, so that we can make sure that your application is reviewed. We would hate for y'all to be not considered because your application is considered incomplete. So just something to be mindful of. Um, and then I mentioned this a few times throughout the presentation, but sharing your materials with your recommenders. So not just your essays, but also your resume, maybe potentially your transcripts as well, if you feel comfortable with that. But we definitely want them to get a picture and an idea of what program you're submitting to, what your goals are, so that they can clearly speak to those things and how they align with you, how they align with the experiences that they've had with you. And so I think all of that would be really helpful for them. And then it kind of prevents the back and forth so that they don't have to ask, well, what's your goal or what are you thinking? It kind of streamlines all of that. And then if you could also ask your recommender to use the professional letterhead and their professional email, it just makes it easier for us to contact them. We get folks are maybe not in their same position. So like if in the event that like your maybe your instructor has switched institutions or maybe they're no longer at that institution, maybe they're having trouble getting the recommendation request in their email, well then okay, like reach out. We can definitely figure out what to do and how to update those things. Perfect. And then once you get to this section of the application, there's going to be a department grant application. This part is really, really important because we do offer department awards that are specific to FUNG. And so we have quite a few things. We have a Dean's Full Scholarship, we have a Dean's Grant, there is a FUNG Excellence Award. We also have opportunity grants that are available, and pretty much the ranges from those things are $1,000 to $30,000 for the duration of the year here. And so once you get to the department grant application, it's going to be really, really important that you fill it out in its entirety so that you can be considered for all of the funding. So this is what it's going to look like. So once you jump over to that section, it's gonna give you sort of this outline. It's going to give you the section A, B, C, D, and I believe E as well. And so you'll input all of this information. Once you get to the personal resources and the family and sponsor resources, it's going to ask for actual numbers and metrics. If the numbers are zero, so let's say that you don't anticipate that you're going to get any additional funding from maybe an employer, or you don't anticipate that your family is going to be able to provide additional resources. In those categories, if that answer is zero, it's going to be really important that you actually submit a zero. So type that in. Don't leave anything blank in that process, or your department award application will be considered incomplete. So you won't be considered for funding if you don't fill out this part in its entirety. Once you get here to section E, so it's going to work through the A, B, C, D, and again, all of those are typically the numbers. Once you get to section E, you're going to have the opportunity grant essay. And this is where you're going to sort of outline any of your like financial circumstances, any of the reasonings behind why you may need additional support. And so make sure that you fill this out. It doesn't need to be a long essay. It's just a brief explanation of sort of your circumstances and your situation. Outline that here. And then once we get this and all of the numbers that we need first, I'm pointing to the screen like y'all can see that. Like section A, B, C, and D with the cursor. Once you fill all of those things out in their entirety and the essay, then it will be considered for a review. But again, if any of those sections are left blank, then your application is considered incomplete in this section. Perfect. And then once we get to the end of the application, it's going to ask for an application fee. And so this is where we're going to go ahead and process everything. You can either use a credit or a debit card. And then if you are somebody who does qualify for a fee waiver, then you'll need to make sure that you submit all of the appropriate documentation to Graduate Division. They are separate from Fung Institute. So if you're interested in one of those fee waivers and you meet the requirements, then you'll need to go through graduate admissions. And then once you get down here for the payment, you'll simply opt for what you're going to do. So either the credit or the debit, and then you'll be able to move forward. And then typically, I believe it takes about 24 hours, maybe not that long. I've seen folks get their link a little after, but I've heard folks say that they haven't been asked for a payment on the back end, and then they submit, and then the payment request comes after. So just be mindful, check your email, be on it, and then you'll get notifications too, just in the event that like you haven't paid, it'll tell you, hey, we still, require payment for you in order for your application to be considered complete. And so again, with the Berkeley application fee waiver, right now with the Fung Institute, what we are offering is if you are a current UC Berkeley student or a UC Berkeley alum, and then any current undergrads from any UC system or CSU system, and that are a Cal resident, if you meet any of that criteria, you are eligible for a fee waiver. So again, with the UC and the CSU systems, and you have to be a Cal resident in order to be considered eligible for the fee waiver. And that will automatically apply. So again, like once you get to the end, if you're eligible for that, typically once you submit your application, then you simply won't be asked for payment at the end because it's automatically applied. And then the graduate division fee waivers. So again, if you qualify for one of those, then you're eligible to submit. I would go through on the graduate division page and go ahead and check out what those requirements are. But there are two ways to do that. And in order to be eligible for them, then you need to demonstrate that you have financial need, or that you're a current participant in certain programs that would qualify you for a fee waiver. And so all of that material can be found on the graduate division page, but the link is also right here. If you're welcome to access that. I'm going to see if we can put that in the chat without me jumping over. And then, yeah, so submit that through there. You'll upload all the documentation, and then you'll be in touch with Graduate Division, as again, that's a separate process from Fung. And then, so in order to claim it, you do need to, again, have your application and materials submitted by January 7th. And then you also have to have the fee waived by January 7th. So that's why I highly recommend folks starting on this sooner than later. So that way you can actually get all of the materials input, because they do get backed up, especially as we near the deadline. Folks start to submit, they start to inquire. So definitely sooner than later. And so whenever you get to the end of that application, you're going to go ahead and select credit card option, but simply don't pay. So you're going to select it and then you're going to bypass it. And then you'll be able to submit your application by the deadline. And then that's it. Just make sure that you submit all your materials to graduate division if you're requesting that fee waiver. So what happens after you submit? So everything's going to be in review for a while. And so typically folks can anticipate that they start to hear back anywhere between, I would say, like March, April, depending on which program you submitted to. Sometimes, like if it's a smaller program, then they obviously may have a shorter turnaround time. But once you submit, you won't be able to make any updates, but you will be able to sort of check the status of your materials. You can see like, hey, are my test scores in? Did my letters of recommendation make it in? So even though you formally submitted and it's locked, you still have access to all of this. And then the admissions committee will review the applications, and then we recommend the top applicants out of the completed applications. And then at that point, no application edits are allowed. So again, like once you've formally submitted, everything's locked in. So just make sure that you have taken your time to draft up the things that you need. Ensure that you have the right statements uploaded, that you have the updated resumes there. Because again, like once it's in, we're not able to go through and make those changes. The only thing that I'm allowed to do at that point is if your like GRE scores came in and they're under a different email, at that point I would only be able to merge, but I'm not allowed to update or upload. And so again, everything's got to be in by the deadline. And then the Office of Graduate Division is the one that makes the final review. And so the Fung Institute, like the review committee, will make their recommendations, and then Grad Division has final say. And so they're the ones that will provide the final approval. And then applicants should be able to, you should hear back, we would say before mid-April. And so that's sort of the timeline. It's what you can expect once you've submitted your application. Um, and yeah, and then you're welcome to submit obviously questions and things that you have to us like at that time. And then we'll do our best to clarify, but we do ask that folks try to be patient with our admissions committee as they are reviewing a ton of applications for multiple programs across the board, not just MEng. And so it's like they're also reviewing applications for like the Master of Science program and all of those things. So it is a lengthy process, but you will hear back. We promise. We won't keep you hanging. All right, and so this is just a final walkthrough of your application checklist. So the things that you're going to need are your statement of purpose, your personal history statement, both of which are 1,000 word maximums. You're going to need either your current resume or CV, two letters of recommendation that are required, and then the third letter of recommendation for electrical engineering and computer science. You're also going to need your transcripts, so the unofficial ones that show all of your undergraduate college level work or any graduate level coursework that you've completed. And then copies of your degree certificate if your transcripts are translated. And then test scores if they're required. So again, only if you're submitting for IEOR do we require the GRE. And then if you are an international student who did not graduate from an institution that was primarily taught in English, then we require the TOEFL and the IELTS. And then lastly, your application fee and or documentation for the fee waiver. And that would complete your checklist for MEng. And so we're gonna jump over. Why am I not changing? Okay. And then we have another presentation coming up tomorrow. That one is going to be specific to the essays for the application. So both the personal history statement and the statement of purpose. And you're welcome to register for that using this link is right here. And then we're going to have the same three rounds. So the general information session, if you missed it, and then another round of writing workshops and another round of application workshops for the month of December. And so we have those things coming up as well. And we're going to go ahead and open up the floor for questions. And so if you want to follow us, if you have any questions that you want to send us that maybe you couldn't think of on the spot, then you're also welcome to send those over to the Fung inbox. And so, yeah, we'll go ahead and take those things. I know that we've had Maritzi, Janine, and I believe Nabiha in the background, sort of answering questions and things that have come in through chat. But yeah, we'll go ahead and open it up. You're welcome to turn on your camera if you'd like, or you can ask them through the chat. And I believe we also have some current students on our call today as well. And so if for some reason any of those questions come up, we can see if any of our folks are also able to answer those. So thank you again for being here, and I hope that we start to see your application soon if we haven't already. All right, Ali, I saw your hand first.
Yeah, hi, good morning. And then again, thanks for the session. I got to learn a lot. I had a few questions regarding certain application articles and things. First of all, since the MEng programs are more career focused rather than research and academic, well, in the general research sense, focused. Should we submit a CV, which is a bit more academically inclined with, our previous research experience, or a resume, which has more of our work experience and things of that sort?
Ooh, that's a good question. Janine, could I ask for some support with that?
Yeah, I answered that in the chat. I mean, it's really up to you. I think it's
Hmm.
what do you want to showcase to the reviewers? I think nowadays resumes and CVs are kind of used interchangeably. So it's just kind of, yeah, I mean, because I just call everything a CV, but yes, there's CVs formally for like grant application and stuff like that. So but I mean, I think the use of it is the same, right? Like you were, I don't know, you chaired this committee as a student, or you were,
Hmm.
you co-wrote something with this professor or something like that. Whatever you
Hmm.
think. This is where you also have your grades are your grades, right? But your scores are your scores if you choose to if you're sending in GRE scores. But what you have the power to really kind of over that you have any say over are your essays and then what you write in your resume and CV. Obviously, don't lie, but if it's something that you're extra proud of, go ahead and enter it. And I don't think that there's really in this case, there isn't really a difference between if it's a resume or a CV. It's just the content that you enter in and want to make sure that it applies to like what you're saying in your essays.
Thanks. I had one more question. So when we calculate our major GPA, so in that process, because when I was in undergrad, there were courses that were specifically part of my major, and then I did minors. I did a minor in which I took courses. Well, let me make it a bit more clear. I did, let's say, a software engineering minor whereby my major was information technology. Now, of course, both of those are sort of related. When we say calculating our major GPA, do we mean that we're calculating it for the major that we're applying for, as in the program we're applying for, the MEng program? Or is it our strictly our major that we did in our undergrad, which of course, generally relates to program that we're applying to. So can I include the courses I took as part of my software engineering minor, just because they're related to the MEng program that I'm choosing?
I would say in this case, that would be like if it's asking for the major GPA, then I would say it's
Hmm.
specific to the coursework that was taken for the major, not the minor, specific to your undergraduate institution, not for Fung.
Hmm. Okay. But here's the thing. I mean, I have lost some documents like from my undergrad. So sometimes it's a bit confusing which ones I took as part of my minor requirements, which ones were more, strictly part of my major. So if there is that sort of overlap in the courses, I mean, there are a few, for which I have that issue, but for most I can tell. Would it be an issue if, let's say, I happen to include them or not include them? Is it going to be like a very strict evaluation in that sense? Will they like go to my university's program, see, okay, this major had these courses, did he include them or not? Or is it just generally something that, you know, we have to look out for?
Well, we definitely want that to be like as accurate as
Mhm.
possible, because
Mhm.
it is reflected on the materials, and so it's also
Mhm.
in that sense, it's like it's also an honor system. And so if for some reason it feels like it's too complicated to calculate the major and all of that, and it's not already outlined on your transcript, that's also something that
Hmm.
you can simply bypass and just keep it all together
Oh,
in the cumulative overall GPA or other GPA.
okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're so welcome. All right, Jack, I think I saw your hand next.
Awesome. Thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, awesome. So thanks for the presentation again. I had kind of a similar question about the GPA questions. So I did my undergrad in neuroscience and I'm applying to bioengineering. So I was wondering how I would navigate the question that said, like, what was your GPA with courses that are relevant to what you're applying to? So like how I would decide what courses in my undergrad fit like bioengineering and which ones don't.
Mhm. Janine, can I ask for some support with that, please?
Yeah, I mean, does it have bioengineering? Is it a bioengineering department? Is it offered through bioengineering? Does it have like the curriculum overlap? Is it cross-listed? I think that's something that it's up to you to kind of not deliver, decide, kind of tease out what classes are appropriate. And then if you feel like there's if you feel like you're making kind of a connection because of, I don't know, whatever kind of thing you're using rubric, then you would use your essays to say, maybe I didn't have a traditional bioengineering background, but in these classes, it included these, the curriculum for, the basics or the cornerstone of bioengineering or something like that that can elucidate what the point and connection you're making. But in terms of, yeah, because here, I don't know where you went or are going for your bachelor's, but here at Berkeley, bioengineering classes are bioengineering. And then if it's cross-listed, there's usually a C and a number or whatever, but you would know if the content is bioengineering or whatever other discipline.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, I think my school's a little more liberal with like with how they classify, but I think I can make those
Yeah.
calls.
I mean, take a look at the syllabus and see, what are the major kind of subject matter.
Mhm. Awesome. Thank you.
So thank you, Janine. Thank you, Jack. Max, I saw you next.
Yeah, so
Maximilian.
cool.
Yeah.
So thanks for the session, first of all. And then I have a question. So I have done lots of my work combined with my studies here back in Germany. And let's say I have worked for this car manufacturer and also completed a capstone project there. Would I split that up into a separate category? So that's like academic mixed with an industry project. Or would I combine my work experience during the studies with my industry project for university?
I think that really depends on how it's like outlined. I think you're gonna have a couple
Mm,
opportunities to do that. You'll be able to like obviously input it manually like inside the system. Um, and then you'll also be able to outline that on your CV. Um,
exactly.
so I've again, we kind of covered that the CV and the resume are like one in one, right? So I think it's a matter of like outlining what you feel like is most relevant, what's going to make the biggest point, what's going to show
Yeah.
the connection to the program. And I think there are a few ways to do that. And technically, I guess like it really like is technically considered work experience. Like when you're a student, I feel like I know Janine and I kind of I think it talked about that at one of the last presentations where it's also one of those things where you could input it as work experience because technically,
Hmm.
it's technically work, even though you're
Yeah, I've heard that
doing
like
research.
last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. And then, um, okay, yeah, that actually clarifies quite a lot. And I have like a more personal question, more fitting to the last call. Is there any of those engineering courses that are not too maths proof heavy but very very applied? Means that very like deep in industry, lots of applied programming, things like that.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to answer that. Um,
So Maximilian, you asked that in the chat, right? Or the
Yes,
MS.
as well.
So you can review the sample curriculum. I
Ah,
linked
perfect.
there. So the mechanical
Ah, nice.
engineering has
All right.
great. Oh, and then I'll look at EECS because not all of the departments MEng websites are equal. So
Yeah.
does a great job, but let me find EECS and then I'll link it as well.
Thanks so much. Super
Thank you,
great.
Janine.
All right.
That was a great way to put it too. Awesome. Any other questions, Max, or is that's all?
That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah. Kirby, you're next.
Hello. Um, I am a bioengineering undergraduate major right now, and I'm interested in applying for the Master's of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering. How do you evaluate applicants who come from adjacent fields but want to like pivot into a different major?
Well, first and foremost, we encourage that. That's
Okay.
definitely what Fung is about. It's not, we also are open to folks who don't come from an engineering background, right? So like it's not uncommon for folks to come in here and be like, hey, I started, in this field and now I know I still want to do engineering, but it's just a little different. I think there are a few ways to make that connection. I think you can talk about that both in your statement of purpose,
Okay.
and then you'll also be able to outline some of that maybe potentially in your CV or your resume as well. But I think one of the bigger ways to do that is to be able to make the connection with sort of like what has brought you to that, and like you can also, how Janine mentioned earlier, like make the connection of some of the courses that you've taken that have kind of drawn you there as well, like where there's
Right.
overlap. We anticipate that you're not going to have all the things, right? Because like, nobody does coming into a grad program. That's why you're signing up for a grad program. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Have I missed any questions in the chat? By the way, thank you so much, Maritzi, Janine, Nabiha, for just like helping with all of this in the background. Would be impossible without y'all.
Would be impossible without you leading.
Awesome. Does anybody else have any other questions? We've got about 5 minutes. Happy to answer anything. There is no such thing as a silly question. So feel free to ask away.
I came up with another.
One little sort of, oh, sorry, I mean, you go ahead.
Hey, let me get this one out first. For the academic history,
Mhm.
what if it was not like went to community college first, but just like I took one or two classes at a community college, like if that quarter or semester, it wasn't offered at my institution, I took it somewhere else. Do we still include that institution in the academic history section, even though it wasn't like a full degree with them? It was just like a one-off or one-off class, sort of. Uh,
Yes. Yes. Any undergraduate courses taken at any institution, no matter what, we would need those transcripts for all of them.
got it. Cool.
Thank you, Michael. Ali?
So, I mean, this is more in the category of silly questions, I guess. But in any case, so I mean, of course, there's fields with asterisks in the application, and there's lots of other fields I noticed that do not. And there's lots of information that they're asking about, family history, and if I remember, uh, what our parents did, tons of things like that. Some things might be confusing for a few, I mean, in terms of, their situation and all. So is it okay to leave those empty, some of those empty? Um, or would you recommend that we fill in each and everything and that would make our application more solid?
Well, so to be clear, like let me jump over
Hmm.
to, I'm going to jump over to this slide. Okay, so
I mean, of course, there's the award. Yeah, that,
yeah,
of course, we have to fill in every section of,
yeah, this one
so.
absolutely fill out every section or else it's considered incomplete. Um,
Mhm,
Anything that is in the application that doesn't have an asterisk, so like
mhm,
up here, for example, like cumulative GPA is going to be one that's obviously required,
mhm,
and then the rest of them are optional.
mhm,
So it's not a matter of like making it stronger or not. Like no one thing's gonna
mhm,
like automatically rule you out. The ones that are optional, I feel like are just about making connections and building a stronger picture. So
mhm,
it's helping the committee get insight to some other things. And so that's why I was saying earlier where like sure, like if maybe you have like an overall like GPA of a 3.1, but if your major was something that you really were super great at, and then maybe that is a 3.8, then I feel like that would be a reason to include it in here because it would help your application. It would help in that sense of like painting out the picture so that they could see what areas they're working with. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. But if, for instance, obtaining that information is sort of a hassle, like, discerning what my major GPA actually is, I mean, in some cases, of course, then
Mhm.
would it be okay to leave that blank
Yeah,
or?
absolutely,
Hmm,
absolutely, totally. It's totally okay. And I should reiterate that too, that like in this section, it's not like anything with an asterisk is not required. It's just one of those things where like if it feels like
hmm.
it's going to be helpful, include it. If for some
Like in
reason
this situation you specified, like,
Right.
like
But if for some reason
showing
it
strength
feels
or something.
way too complicated or it feels like it's something that is just like way out of your element, that's totally okay.
Hmm,
I also feel like this other section here is what would also allow you to like input as is, like
hmm,
the other scale.
hmm,
And then you can upload your documents if you feel like like if you decided to do it and then you were like, this is how I came up with that number, then you could include that information there.
hmm.
But outside of
Right.
that, like if it feels way too complicated, then just bypass, just input your information and then paint the picture with your statements.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And then one quick question, Mars, because I think I have the answer, but I want to make sure. Camilla in the chat said if those community college credits were transferred to our main university and are listed in our transcript, do we still need to submit that community college's transcript for the class?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, to my understanding, yes. Even though it's still included, even though it's a transfer, um, typically what I've seen about 9 times out of 10 is that on your, even though it's reflected on your transcript, it'll typically say like T and then the grade that you got.
Mm.
Or like the grade and then the T, which tells us like, okay, you got like, but typically I don't actually see the grade. I usually just see like TC, which stands for transfer credit. Um, and so a lot of times, even though it's like it's included in there and we can see that all of the requirements have been met, it's also one of those things where, we have to see the individual distinction of your grades through this other institution as well.
Yeah, perfect. I think we've got to all the questions. But if there's anything we missed or something that you thought of, just email us at funginstitute@berkeley.edu.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for being with us today. Good luck. I hope to see your application soon. And again, like Janine said, reach out if you need anything. We're here. Bye, y'all. Have a good day. Take care.
Thank you guys for the presentation. Appreciate it.
You're so welcome. Have a good day. Happy Monday, y'all.
And you guys as well.